This is the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast. I'm Andrew Savage. Nancy Richards is off tonight, but we have an exciting show for you nonetheless. We have one of the candidates in the contested City Council District 49 primary for the Democratic side. Aidan Rivera is here. Welcome to the show, Aidan.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And so before we get started and jump right into the issues and who you are, why you're running, I just want to say, and people know this for sure, that we're a forum for all candidates in on the primary side. Since this is a contested primary with an incumbent Democrat, all the candidates have been invited to come on. I'm so happy to say that many of them have agreed and have actually reached out to us, like Aiden did. And so we want to keep this as a space for candidates to come and make their case to voters. And if there was anything that we learned from that nightmare election last year, that podcasts are the way to go. As far as the media is concerned, screw MSNBC, come to us. Uh, so we're happy to say that Aiden's on tonight. We have the rest of the candidates coming on at some point just to make their case to voters, and we're really happy that we're able to have that impact and bring that to you. So, Aiden, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So again, thank you for having me. Um, my name's Aidan Rivera. I'm running for city council in the 49th district of Staten Island. That's the North Shore. We got three districts and we're here on the North Shore. So I was born and raised on Staten Island. 28 right now. So I was born in 96 and I'm the only member of my family that was born and raised on the island. My mother and my father kind of did the usual New Yorker pilgrimage. They went Manhattan, Brooklyn, and then crossed the Verrazano and came here and had me. Um,
That means they
and
should
I,
be going to Jersey at some point.
no, maybe Florida. I don't know, but um, so I was born and raised here, and growing up, I would say that things were pretty average for myself. Um, but we were never really well off, and I would say money and finances. Obviously, I was raised socially left leaning, so that impacted my politics and my worldview. But growing up, not really having a lot also impacted my worldview and my politics. Um, Things were pretty average, and we got along well when I was younger. My mother was a school teacher, and she was a high school English teacher, so I got to make sure that everything that I write for the campaign is written well. Um,
We're
and
teachers. We appreciate that. Nancy and I are teachers. We appreciate that.
oh, see, yeah. So it's given me a lot of appreciation, my entire life for teachers and what they do. And she was an English teacher until she couldn't teach anymore, and she's dealing with chronic health issues for her life now, and she can't work. And then my father was a peace officer, and he actually worked at CSI until just after 9/11. He almost died at an accident on CSI's campus, and
Oh, oh,
he
I'm
faced a
sorry.
lot of health issues because of that. Yeah. Um, so neither of my parents growing up, they faced a lot of health issues, and because they couldn't work, income was lessened, and then it was also impacted because, um, you know, growing up, like I said, things were usual. We could go on vacation every now and then, but um, I went to a lot of free events at parks and classes and dealt with athletics. And then middle school into high school, and halfway through high school, um, I was a victim of assaults on the island. And on my way home from school at Curtis one day, I was a victim of gun violence, and that really got me interested in local politics and what it can do. Because the then city council member, Debbie Rose, was in office. And something that really stayed with me was how her office helped me when I needed help. My mother didn't know where to go or what to do or who to talk to, but she reached out to them, and they made it so that the NYPD had a detective actually reach out to me and actually gave us the time of day and dedicated time to us and made us feel heard and scene. So that mattered a lot to me. And because of that, then I got involved with some nonviolence work in the community, whether it was gun violence or just violence in general. Through Debbie Rose's office, I got involved with nonviolence work, and that got me interested in local politics. And then immediately after that, almost in the same summer, actually, when I was 15 or 16, my father both got cancer and then passed away. So what was a little hard when I was younger got much harder um, towards the end of being a young man growing up. Um, and that kind of also shaped my worldview because that gave me a perspective of how important community is when it comes together. And it was interesting seeing everyone trying to lend a hand and doing what they can to help one another. Really meant a lot to me, but also more than that, I kind of took that as a lesson for the rest of my life. And then I went to college and I went to Pace University. I studied criminal justice and political science. And about halfway through was 2016, which for a lot of people was kind of their political awakening.
Oh,
And
night, nightmare. But go ahead.
yeah,
That we're
well,
still.
it felt good for a little while. It felt hopeful.
Oh,
Um,
oh, it's just, the never-ending era. I just feel like it's just never going to end. But go ahead.
well, looking back, the hope for me was the Bernie Sanders campaign, and that was kind of my entrance into electoral politics. Being honest, was working on that 2016 campaign and door knocking, canvassing, phone banking, and things like that. And I remember something that inspired me was hearing that my parents phone banked for Obama in Obama '08, and I was like, man, I really want to do something like that and talk to people and get involved. And I felt inspired, and I feel like a lot of people did. So that was 2016, and that really halfway through college, I had a shift mentally from just thinking about work and a job and a career and thinking about something that I was passionate about. And that started to be government and politics and helping people. So I got more interested in that. And then upon finishing college, I was looking for things to do. And almost immediately after leaving, because I had done some model UN work in college, I was interested in the UN. And I found a NGO that worked with gun violence internationally at the UN, and I worked with them as a youth ambassador. So I was lucky enough to go to the UN in the city and take notes on meetings in the General Assembly and organize events and reach out to, uh, gun violence prevention organizations from different countries and things like that. And that was really important work for me. Um, and then, just coming more recently to speed it up, then I did what I would say is just some work for a while. For a couple of years, I did security. So the last time that I ran for office in 2021, I could tell people that I was a security officer. But right now, I work full time as a case manager for victims of crime, and I work at the Central Family Life Center here on the island in Stapleton. It's a community-based nonprofit with a bunch of different programs for the community, and one of them is for victims of crime. So I'm a crime victims advocate.
Okay,
And that's
well,
what I do right now. And then in my part time, I'm involved with the party. I'm
yeah.
on county committee. I'm with the Young Democrats, and I'm with DSA.
That's really the crime victim side of this, I think, is a really important perspective to bring. It's certainly something that's top of mind for a
Mhm.
lot of people. And you are the vice president now of the Young Democrats, which a position that I once held once upon a time in a land far away. And so I held that position a while ago, but that's terrific. So, talk about what are the big issues for you. You mentioned some of them as far as your upbringing is concerned, gun violence prevention, um, coming together as a community. Obviously, you're passionate about public safety, but if you had maybe two or three issues to say that you're running on, what would you say?
Yeah, so there's a lot that I could talk about, and there's a lot that I kind of have expertise in and that I'm really passionate about. But my three main issues that I really want to focus on are housing, transportation, and education. I think, especially housing is a very big issue locally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and well, housing. I mean, on Staten Island, I was talking to Mike last week about this. The challenge I find in housing on Staten Island is most of what's needed to uh, get new and better and more affordable housing is changing zoning laws so that you have these vacant buildings sitting there that could potentially be repurposed
Mhm.
for that reason. But NIMBY is very strong on Staten Island. And so what's your plan and how do you get around that? Because I think you can't really get to the meat of the plan without really saying how you're going to assuage, people who are skeptical, to say the least.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question, and that's a really good, I guess, a really hard challenge. I would say the plan is kind of twofold. I would love to just talk all day to people who are like-minded, like me, and think that we need more affordable housing. And like myself, I want to redefine what affordable means and things like that. But talking to people who, like you said, are more NIMBY or, um, like that, I would say kind of like doing things addresses the concerns that they have. So, for instance, housing encompasses a lot. I mean, if you want more businesses, what's a better way to have that than having more people? If you want to address homelessness, what's a better way to address homelessness than giving people homes? And if you were to get into homeless housing, have something that has wraparound services. That way, it's not just housing or shelter for overnight, but something where people can actually get the long-term help that they need and set them on a good path. And, from my perspective, the things that I want to put forward and talk about, I come from a place of empathy and also trying to solve them, obviously, with tried and true things that I think will work. Um, but at the same time, also, they serve to, I guess, address things that other people might be concerned about. Like if someone's number one concern is seeing homeless people, which I'm more concerned about their well-being. But if that's someone else's concern, what's a better way to address that than getting that person housing and helping them?
So you're approaching housing as not just putting bodies in buildings, it's more um, filling the need, yes, but also tackling a number of different issues all at once through housing. So you mentioned quality of life and getting other services that potentially people might need under the
Yeah,
same umbrella. Am I interpreting that correctly?
no, you're exactly right. I think sometimes we just see housing, well, so a lot of people see it as an investment. I see it as a social good. It's something that's a human right that people need to literally live. So why not organize community around that? I mean, having a community center associated with a housing place or an apartment building or something like that. Um, yeah, yeah, that's what I would say. And also just to, I mentioned homelessness, but also to address what I guess you would say is average people. I myself, I applied, I think it was last month, closed the lottery for the new lighthouse apartment that development by the ferry.
Right.
There was a housing lottery, and it was through, I think, Housing Connect. And I applied. I went to the website and I'm looking, and you could see all the different housing lotteries. And I click on the different boroughs, and you could see the rental and the the buyer's lottery. And I look on Staten Island, and there's only one lottery, and it's one rental, and it's that property. But you look at all these other boroughs, and there's multiple apartment buildings, different properties, and it's, you start to question, but why don't we have what we can have and what we can do here?
Yeah. And what you talked about also before, you said that you were looking to redefine affordability and what that means. And so could you talk
Hmm.
a little bit about that? What do you mean by that? Are we talking like I know when we're talking about tax brackets, let's say we're talking about it used to
Hmm.
be if you made over 200,000, you would be taxed more. Now it's over 400,000. So is it something like that where you're looking at tax brackets? How would that work?
Something that really interests me in regard to when people say affordable is the AMI. So just saying that to someone who doesn't, you know, look into things like this, the AMI is the area median income. And that's the metric that is used to determine whether something is affordable or not. And then given the contracts for different properties and developments, they might determine what percentage of that legally has to be affordable, whether it's, I think, 40%, 50%, whatever the percentage is. So something that I'm really interested in, if it's possible, I would try to do it, would be changing the metric that we use to determine affordable. Because it's one thing to just say, I want more affordable housing. That's very vague. But to say, I want truly affordable housing and I want to redefine what affordable means, I think that means something. To say, I think someone working full time at the minimum wage should be able to afford housing, period. And I think at a minimum, the majority of housing should be truly affordable. That's what I'm looking for.
And so you would use that median income as a way to determine, let's say if a new development went up, like what to charge people as far as rent is concerned and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So right now people use the AMI, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's something like a federal metric.
Right.
And it uses, when they say an area median income, the area that it encompasses is pretty big. And for New York City, I think at this point it might still even encompass a little bit of area that isn't even New York City. So let's say, what if we had a New York City AMI, or what if we had even just a New York State AMI that took into account, instead of these broad generalizations, a county or a zip code or something like that. If you had me and Bill Gates in the same room, our average salary would be pretty high. But if you actually get more specific and into the details, you'll, get a better image of how people are.
Yeah, so I think it's sort of this, veneer of, well, things, it's like this gift wrapping and window dressing of, well, things are much better than they actually are. So let's actually meet people where they are and get down to the reality of the situation.
Exactly. And that's what I would really love to do, especially in regard to housing. And then the same goes for transportation. I think that right now it's a little embarrassing how things are, because I think that we need more, and I think that we could also look into free public transportation. There's been some case studies done in New York City with free bus routes, and not only does it improve quality of life for people, it reduces law enforcement and public interactions, which could result in something bad. It reduces assaults between uh, pedestrians and bus drivers. For a million reasons, free fares is a good idea. And then on top of that, there's other things. Increased ferry routes would be incredible. I would love to see North Shore rail line, which existed once upon a time, and the bike share would be nice, because uh, if I'm right, we're the only borough without one. So,
Yeah, and so you mentioned housing, you touched a little bit about transportation. What about you? I know education was on that list of three.
mhm.
Would and I know the city council has a very limited say in this, but would you advocate for Albany to continue mayoral control of schools?
Hmm, that's interesting. I would have to look more into that. I would say one of my biggest concerns right now has been um, free pub free public college, like making CUNY free again. Which is also another thing that's really hard, because that also requires some work with New York State. Um, but I would definitely look into that mayoral control. Um, yeah, but the main thing that I've really been focusing on is primarily Free City College.
Okay.
We have a CUNY campus right here on the island. They have some satellite offices down by the ferry. I think it would be great to make it more accessible for people by making it free, like it also was once upon a time.
Yeah, and so I think college affordability is a really big issue, but as far as like K through 12 education
Hmm.
is concerned, like I used to be very much against mayoral control because I first started teaching years ago when Bloomberg was mayor, and there was a hostile, acrimonious relationship between our union and his administration. Um, and it wasn't that much better under the current mayor and the previous mayor. But I also see the other side of, if you get rid of mayoral control, then you open things up to dark money and campaigning for school boards and things like that. And we've seen some pretty crazy shit coming out of school boards. I mean, around the country, insane stuff. And so not that I'm not for democracy or letting people have a say and all that, but I think we have to find some balance and maybe keep a lid on the crazy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The hard part is if you loosen the reins a little bit, or if you open up the floor, any any kind of person with a bad interest will find a way to get their tendrils into it. So, like you said, dark money into something that should just be, you know, caring parents or a caring community. So,
Yeah, and well, speaking of the mayor, uh,
mhm.
we learned yesterday that the Justice Department is dropping the federal charges against the mayor. Surprise, surprise. Like who could have seen that coming? Just the two most transactional people on earth making a deal to, scratch each other's back. Uh, so, Adams lets ICE into the city to, tear the place up, and he gets his charges dropped. And so it's a win-win for them, but not for us.
Yeah.
And so what would you do as far in the city council, as far as making the mayor and other city officials more accountable? I'm not only thinking about Mayor Adams and his issues, but I'm also thinking about the money that was supposed to go to mental health for the de Blasio administration that went down a black hole somewhere. So, what would you do to make city government much more accountable than what it has been recently?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that that really hits onto one of the main things that average people care about is holding their elected officials accountable and also expecting that they will be held accountable. So when they do something, you're not just looking around saying, what's going on? And I think city council has two main important powers, and that's, bills and legislation and local laws and things like that, but then also acting as a check to the mayor. That way they don't just act like a king of the city. Um, I think there's a few things that you probably can do in city council. I would really try to just secure whatever we get promised as a guarantee, however that can be done. That way it can't be taken back and it can't be whittled down. And I think something else that should be done is pressuring elected officials and pressuring them properly. I mean, a lot of these people that are in office for vanity. They're in office because they like being in office. And one of their biggest challenges isn't saying, you know, something that you would find genuine, but it's hitting them where it hurts and telling them, I will do anything that I can to make sure that you do not get reelected. I think that you do not deserve to be in office, and I can drag you out of office kicking and screaming, but I can make sure that in November you're not reelected and you're not going to be in power again. And I promise you that that will happen. I think that's something and that should be done. I mean, each city council member should kind of act as a conduit of their community to the mayor. And, that kind of also relates to the North Shore right now because um, I feel like that's not being done. And I think that that's something that I would really love to do is show people what local politics and what city council can do. I've been asking people if they know what city council is. I've been telling people that I'm running for city council, and a lot of people, if you ask them about city council, if they don't know about politics and if they're just an average person, they either won't know what it is, or they'll know what it is and they'll know the city council member, but they won't have a very favorable view. Meanwhile, I can tell you one or two people from other places in the city, but why can I do that? Because they're doing things and they're delivering for their community. So, that's something that I would really love to do is be that voice in the city council that keeps the mayor in line a little bit and acts as the voice of their huge community.
And so one of the things that you were talking about is just holding people accountable through elections. And so one thing that's very different about city elections in recent years is that there's ranked choice voting now. And
Hmm.
so ranked choice voting is you get up to five choices. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so after that, I have no fucking idea what the calculation is and how it goes. But like, your vote, if your first doesn't make it, then it goes to something else. Like that, you fucking lost me after the list. So
Yeah.
just explain how that works to listeners who may not be aware of that.
Okay. Yeah. You asked me a great question because this really interests me. I think ranked choice voting is amazing. And I think we did a really big disservice within the last few years with not educating the public on it. So the first time that we had a ranked choice voting election, everyone was confused. And I would really love to do it. I told myself I want to do at least one event, which I know is the bare minimum, but at least one public event during this campaign cycle, just explaining ranked choice voting. But pretty briefly, like you explained, ranked choice voting is just that you rank who you would prefer in that seat, in that order. And then if you look at the election results on election day from the previous election, let's say 2021, uh, New York City Council District 49, you can see how, let's say there were six or nine candidates, and then each cycle, let's say, or each round, they whittle down until there's one person left. And what it really is, I mean, if you ask me, it should be people ranking who they believe should be in office and who best represents their views and their beliefs. And then it kind of consolidates those votes more and more until you get down to the two final people. And that's, almost what you see what would be a general election between two people. But it really is just the consolidation of votes so that you don't have a completely frayed and fragmented field.
Okay. Yeah, so, I remember voting. I don't even remember the order I put the council candidates in last time, but I do remember the mayoral, more or less the order I put the mayoral candidates in. And by the way, I didn't put the mayor on the current mayor on my list at all. And like I voted for the I voted for the socialist in the general election. I'm not a socialist, but I believe in capitalism and all that. But I've never I didn't even know her name. I just couldn't stomach voting for that guy. And
That
so
says something.
yeah, and well, speaking of socialism, you mentioned DSA before, and so DSA is the Democratic Socialists of America, and a lot of the times what happens is that that label is misconstrued to mean, you are Maduro or something, and so why don't you explain just what that is in your own words, so this way um, the narrative doesn't get filled with that kind of BS.
Oh yeah, I would love to. So like I said before when I was talking about my upbringing and something that really inspired me and my political awakening, I feel like a lot of people within the past 10 years, that really stems back to 2016. And, Bernie Sanders, for example, really excited me and inspired me because for a number of reasons, but for one reason, he really normalized that word socialist and what that means. And he gave it a face and he explained it to people in normal average terms. And that's really what I want to do because I'm a member of DSA. I'm a member of the local leadership. I even started a book club, a reading group recently. And the thing is, you talk to average people and you don't have to talk in these big terms or, like very professorial. You can just say, I want to talk about your like material conditions, bread and butter issues, um, and people will hear you out. Or before they even hear you out, you could listen to them speak, and they'll probably say what you're going to say. They're probably going to say that they feel overworked, underpaid. They feel like the corporation or the company doesn't care about them. And then you could take it from there and you could talk about why maybe unions are a good idea and why they should get organized and why they should come together in their community. Um, and I think that's really what it's about to me. Like you said, it's not just talking about some Red Scare thing from 50 or 100 years ago, but talking about the practical things. Because if I were to tell people my policies without telling them I'm a socialist, they would probably hear me out. But the second that I just run around saying the word, more people might be, hesitant.
Yeah, well, because for me, I, I, I don't view like a Bernie Sanders the same way as like it's not Fidel Castro communism.
Yeah,
Like for me, I view it as, so we have elements of socialism, at least for now, until Elon plunders that part of it. I mean, we have Social Security, we have Medicare, we have Medicaid, we have all kinds of stuff that one might have described and people did describe at the time as socialist, but they do help people.
yeah. And that's what I really, really like to talk to people about is the American tradition. And we even have a really rich political tradition and history here on Staten Island. Um, of socialist policies. And, we can talk and define different things like social democracy, democratic socialism, and socialists, and what those minute differences are. But like you said, these little socialist nuggets. And you could see things like a free program here, a social service there, free public college here. Um, but if you look at how much that impacts people and affects people and how much they appreciate it, you could look back to someone like FDR, a
Favorite.
president that couldn't stop
Yeah.
being elected.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people care about things like that and appreciate things like that. And yeah,
Absolutely. And so you mentioned being an advocate for victims of crime. And so, as we said earlier, public safety is top of mind for a lot of people as far as what they are prioritizing, especially in local elections. Um, my conclusion after 2024, where we saw, New Jersey only, Kamala Harris only won by 5 points, or New York even, where she only won by 12 or 13, and every borough, Staten Island, forget about it, but everywhere else, um, Donald Trump improved his performance. And I think part of that was a reaction to um, what people perceive as disorder. And
yeah,
um, and what I mean by that is going to the CVS and having to wait 5 years for somebody to open up the thing to get whatever it is you want because they're afraid somebody's going to steal it. And that was not something that we dealt with a whole lot when we were growing up, I don't think. And so, how would you, because I know that there are people running in primaries around the city that are trying to balance having uh, a fair and equitable justice system. I don't think anybody doesn't want that. But also being mindful of the fact that there are bad people who will take advantage of such,
yeah,
and who have taken advantage of such reforms and are saying, well, maybe we need to pull back on some of that. Like, Andrew Cuomo is going to jump into the mayoral race soon, and he's going to act like he didn't sign that bail reform law and say that it's everybody else's fault except for him. And so, what would your plan for public safety be? How would you balance people's rights
Yeah.
being equitable and fair versus actually uh, dealing with public safety and crime?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question, and I think it's grounded in something that you hit the nail on the head with. There's oftentimes two polar views, and it's either you have one person saying, I'm tough on crime, and you have another person saying, you know, whatever it is, but something that's a nicer. And that's all good and well to have these two polar opposites, but I think this is a complex issue, and I'm okay with saying that, and I'm okay with getting into the details. Um, it transcends local politics, unfortunately, because like many things, national politics has kind of found its way and seeped into local issues. Um, so, everyone is concerned about crime, everyone is concerned about safety. Um, but I think that goes without saying. And I think that we can talk about that without fear mongering or scaring people just so that they join our side or something like that. So, I mean, if you look at crime, you could see that I'm pretty sure violent crime has been down. Um, Personally, a criminal justice perspective of mine, I am pro restorative justice. I want to see less of a punitive approach. I'm not a fan of the death penalty. And I can say all of these nice things, but still also admit every now and then crime will be committed and that has to be addressed. So the way that I would actually like to address that is I mentioned that I worked for the Central Family Life Center before and that we have some different programs. One program that was, I think, a foundation of that organization is True to Life, which is a community-based violence interruption program, just to put it simply. And I think community-based programs where you have people who are violence interrupters, don't have a badge and a gun, but care and want to get involved in some way, that's important. I think getting families in therapy to resolve conflicts, you know, that's one way. All of these different routes that aren't just over policing, those are different routes that we can take. And those look better, they feel better, and they just are better. I grew up, I was born in 1996. I grew up under broken windows, stop and frisk policing. I had friends who were stopped and frisked. I was stopped and frisked. Come to find out years after the fact that even statistically, it doesn't work. So I think what really works will be a community-based approach and then also being proactive. I mean, people, for the most part, don't commit crime just because it's fun. They commit crime out of, I think they're called like crimes of desperation or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
They're stealing, they're robbing, they need money. Um, but if you improve quality of life for the community, that will decrease. Even if it's a little bit, it'll decrease. So making sure that people have jobs, making sure that people have places to go and things to do or feel invested in their community, that will decrease crime. So it's multifaceted approach, a little bit of proactive and a little bit of community.
Okay. And I have one final question for you. So, you chose to run for this seat, so Council District 49. Some might say, why are you challenging a Democratic incumbent? Why not challenge? Why not move to the Mid-Island? There's a Republican there. Why not challenge him? And and you're not the only challenger, as we said in the beginning. There's maybe five or six other candidates, including the incumbent, Councilwoman Hanks. And so, why did you run for this seat?
Mm. No, that's a good question. And oh, I would like to also remind people that this isn't my first time and this isn't just random. This is very intentional and very planned. I ran for the first time in 2021, and I'm not sure if anyone who's running now ran then, but it was also a very contested race. But like you said, this time there's an incumbent, and she is a Democrat. I'm also a Democrat. I understand. But why am I running? I feel like enough isn't getting done. And I feel like the community feels that, and the community feels like there isn't that care and consideration um, being put in. It's one thing to just say, I've delivered X amount of dollars to the community, which I would hope any elected official would do. But it's another to say, I showed up for this. I was there for that. We've had so many local issues within the last few years. We've been home to the Amazon Labor Union, which, when I was running last time and I was working a full-time job, even I found the time to try to be there and be supportive for those people. And now I have one or two friends that are there. Um, we've had immigrant or migrant issues with people who are harassing these people who don't deserve it. I've shown up for that. And like I said before, I could name you one or two other New York City elected officials because I follow politics that I know that they've done one or two really good things or they've taken a strong stance. And I don't think that you can say the same for the incumbent here. So I'm running just because I want to show people what local office can do. When I was young and I was in need and I needed someone to hear me, I felt heard. And I feel like right now a lot of people don't. So I want to deliver that, whether it's just with a kind heart or whether that's with my proposals in city council when we meet.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, Aidan Rivera, for coming on the podcast. This is the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast, and we will see you next week.
Yes. Thank you for having me.